Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's TOC podcast. I'm Joe Weichert, chair of O'Reilly's Tools of Change Conference. Today's podcast is brought to you by Publishers Weekly, our TOC event partner. TOC now has a regular column in Publishers Weekly, and it's called Perspectives. You can keep up on our thoughts in that column, both on their website, publishersweekly.com, and in their print edition. I'm joined today by Brian Jepson. Brian is a senior editor of Make Books here at O'Reilly, and this month's TOC theme is platforms, and Brian has agreed to talk with us about the state of the Android platform. So Brian, welcome to this TOC podcast.
Thanks, Joe. Great to be here.
So Brian, tell me, why is Android a platform publishers should care about? And I say that sort of tongue-in-cheek because despite all the hype and so forth and the market share reports, you never hear much about apps or publishers who are getting rich on Android. So why should we care?
Right. Well, it might go back to the question of what it means to get rich on a platform, I think. There's the question of are we going to sell a lot of apps to people on this platform? But that also ties into the larger question of are we going to sell a lot of apps, period? Mm-hmm. What is the best way to engage? Part of it's selling stuff to people. Part of it's also engaging. For example, we have an companion app for the Maker Faire event, Bay Area, New York Maker Fairs, World Maker Faire in New York, that is. Both of those, we have an app that's free to download. It puts information that's critical to people attending the event. It also puts other information in front of attendees, brings... we had 110,000 people at Bay Area Maker Faire 2012. So we're a publisher though, and we had that on iPhone and Android. So that's very, very valuable to us. So maybe the question is, how should we be selling books to customers? How should we be selling content to customers? Video, books, periodicals. And that is a really difficult question. I don't think anybody's quite figured that out.
Maybe the app approach is not the best, and that an HTML5 one might be smarter because it's across all platforms, right? And of course, every time I see a new report out about Android market share, you see how it's splintered across so many devices and flavors of Android, right? And that the latest version really isn't installed on very many devices, and you compare that to sort of iOS, where it is typically keeping up with the latest version in the installed base. And so that seems to me like it would make developers kind of skittish about investing in Android. Do you see that as a problem? And if so, do you see it being solved anytime soon?
Well, I don't know that it makes them skittish, but it sure is frustrating.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to... I don't know. I've never met anybody who decided not to jump into Android because of fragmentation, but in there, it is aggravating. My experience with Android development is a little different than others because I only touch it where you're using an Android device to move a motor, make a robot do something.
Right.
So I can relate to this fragmentation. There are three ways that Android can talk to robots or microcontroller boards like Arduino. And to be fair, it's a lot easier, even with the fragmentation issue, it's a lot easier to do this on Android than it is on iOS, simply because most of the hardware interfaces that you would use with an iPhone or an iPad are tied to Apple's Made for iPhone and Made for iPod developer program, which is not... you can't just go and sign up like you can on the developer site, pay $99 a year, and have access to all of these protocols and hardware interfaces. It's a very large investment. It takes considerable time to get onboarded. So with Android, we have a few ways to talk to devices. Bluetooth is amazingly the most reliable. I can go back to very old Android devices and largely run the same code on them, at least starting maybe with 2.0 or maybe even 1.6. We have a book in the Make Book series called Make Arduino Bots and Gadgets, where we use Bluetooth to communicate between an Arduino-controlled robot and an Android phone, and it works great. It's very, very reliable.
Shifting gears here for a moment, talking about specific devices. Google's Nexus 7. I've heard a lot of people kind of say that's what the Kindle should have been. What's your impression of the Nexus 7, and is it a game changer?
Well, it's a game changer because it's as cheap as the Kindle Fire.
Yeah.
It's a Nexus that's as cheap as the Kindle Fire. The Kindle Fire had the potential to be a game changer. It's a fantastic device, but it's boxy, it's heavy. It's doesn't have the same feel in your hand. It's still a very nice device, but for my interests, the addition of Bluetooth, near field communication, and the knowledge that at least for a year or two you're going to get the latest version of Android running on the device, plus the front-facing camera. I bought a Nexus 7, and I haven't touched my Kindle Fire since. The price is fantastic. It's a great device. I can load the Kindle app on it. So, really no complaints about it. It plugs right into the ADK 2012 that Google released for the ADK that I mentioned earlier is a hybrid Arduino development environment for creating physical objects that can interact with the real world using Android. So, I have no complaints about the 7. It's a great device.
Okay.
Go buy one.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with
if
my
you haven't
Asus
already.
tablet. That's the thing. I've got this Asus Transformer that has a quad-core processor, and it does everything I need it to do, so I see no reason to upgrade to anything else right now. So,
right, that's a great device.
It is a nice one. As a reminder, today's podcast is brought to you by TOC's event partner, Publishers Weekly, and I'm speaking with Brian Jepson, Senior Editor at O'Reilly. So, Brian, as an iOS to Android convert, I get rid of my iPhone, I get rid of my iPad, and I've switched to Samsung phone and the Asus tablet. I find the app ecosystem has more useful free products than iTunes offers. And in fact, as I think about it, I'm pretty sure I've paid for less than 5 apps in the almost 1 year that I've been on Android, which is great for consumers, but I can't imagine is a really good situation for developers, especially trying to bring them in. So do you think my experience is pretty common, and do you see that changing anytime soon?
Well, it's different than my experience because I'm on Android and I bought quite a few apps. Probably like you, probably not as many as I bought on iOS. I do see more ad-supported apps on Android, and anecdotally, I've heard that can bring in a reasonable amount of revenue around an app. I don't hear from Android developers that they feel like they're missing out because of the number of apps that are free. But I do imagine, given the magnitude, the difference in magnitude between the two app stores, I doubt you'd find an Android developer who wouldn't wish that their apps were selling as well as iOS counterparts. Apple certainly has a real optimized, seamless buying experience. They capture your credit card very early on in your relationship with them. And one thing Apple is extremely efficient at is making it very easy for you to use that credit card that's been on file since you bought your first Macintosh computer.
Yeah.
They've got that down. They've got they really know how to move money from your hands into theirs, and they're extremely good at it.
Although I would argue that Google does a pretty good job of that too, and of course they rebranded everything with the Play Store. What was behind that, do you think? I mean, it's kind of clever and fun, but has it made a difference for them?
It's certainly the family. I was going to say non-geek, but I have family members who are geeks who just really don't have the patience to fiddle around with their phones, and having the store suddenly turning into Play was jarring. Actually, it's not where I would go for a productivity app. I certainly would go looking for a game there. So it's a little confusing. I don't really know what the thinking. I can't imagine what the thinking was behind that, because it simply doesn't suggest to me that I can get anything other than movies, books, or games there. Now, to be fair, that's where a lot of the money is, so why not?
Yeah.
But a lot of people probably wouldn't think to look for a utility app or something else in there. So, it's an interesting move, and I think people still figure it out. I think they still find ways to the apps.
Yeah. Let me ask you also about sort of innovation, if you will. It seems like almost since day one, Android has been perceived as kind of a knockoff of iOS. And yet, I guess recently, I look at a product such as the Galaxy S3 phone, and Samsung has some great commercials out about that. That one where they show how you can take a picture and automatically push it out to everybody that's with you, so you don't have to be copying it and emailing it and so forth. That's a great and clever solution to a problem that people just deal with all the time. And finally, I'm starting to see that's just one example of things where at least Samsung seems to be out in front of Apple now with functionality. So do you think we're going to see a lot more of that as other vendors get involved in Android? Less Me Too-ish, if you will?
I think so. I think in some ways Windows Phone has shown that there is a way to do the small screen touch experience without being a complete rip-off of Apple.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed with their user interface. It's extremely frictionless, and you just find things very easily. I think for a while we were locked in this idea of copying, the basic metaphors of icons appearing in a grid, tapping to launch, and phone, even with Android, the old notion of having floating widgets that are separate from your apps, but still float in the same area. That's something that where Apple didn't go, because it's very clunky, and Windows Phone solved that by making the launchers, the live tiles, also double as widgets.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean that people have more, have a new kid on the block to copy stuff from? Maybe.
Yeah, that's true.
I think what it means, though, is there's more than one way to do it, and people and phone manufacturers are starting to realize it. But I think it's dangerous to do that with Android, because you really do want a common user experience when you're going from one Android device to the other. As much as the phone manufacturers want to differentiate themselves, I don't really think that going down the road of heavily customized UIs is really a good option for them. It may happen that there will be a significant learning curve going from an HTC phone to a Samsung phone. Right now, it's not so bad. It could get worse, which would leave Google to sort of hold the line and sort of point the way in the Nexus series. I prefer the Nexus phone simply because they have an unadulterated user experience. But I do recognize that it's important to do things differently, and maybe what this says is that there needs to be a better way for people to submit features upstream back to Google and maybe have some say in the user experience.
Yeah, okay.
That's big. That could be very, very scary
Right.
to manage, and for the users too.
Yeah. Last question for you, and this is the big one. Save the best for last for you. If I'm frustrated today with fragmentation and also the fact that my devices aren't always on the latest version of Android, what bold predictions do you have for the future of the platform? Are they going to fix those problems? Is there more new, exciting functionality you think will be implemented? What can we look forward to over the next 12 months?
I'd like to think that Google is going to continue with incremental changes. The jump from Gingerbread to Honeycomb, the tablet 3.0, was extremely jarring, and it left Google in the situation where they had two very different operating systems that had to be reunited. And with Ice Cream Sandwich and Jelly, with Ice Cream Sandwich, they reined it back in. With Honeycomb, it was looking like things could go in an ugly direction with real serious fragmentation. One user experience on a phone, one user experience on a tablet. I think they've learned their lesson from that, and I think now, and I hope now, that we're more likely to see incremental changes, sort of Apple style, where there's not going to be some incredible gee whiz introductions where we'll see refinements of the APIs. We'll see the APIs really tracking developments in hardware. Hopefully the focus will be on continue to make phones with more cores, with better graphics capabilities. And yeah, I'm hoping for no revolution over the next 12 months.
Okay, well that's fair, and slow and steady is not bad either. You don't want a whole bunch of feature creep that bloats up, the phone's capabilities and never really gets used.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And customers upgrade phones very slowly, whereas new features come out very quickly. The hardware gets better and better. We're up to quad-core devices. I think they need to be careful about what they're doing, because by chasing the leading edge of the hardware features too much, that exacerbates fragmentation, because then the older phones, or the phones of today that will be the older phones, simply don't have a chance of running the newer operating systems. And Microsoft and Nokia have to deal with that right now with Windows Phone 7.5 and Windows Phone 8. Every Windows Phone on the market and being sold today, the story we've heard is that they will not run Windows Phone 8. That's one way to deal with fragmentation.
Right.
Which is just say sorry.
Yeah, cut off the base.
And that was a big mistake.
Yeah.
Going to leave a lot of angry users.
Okay, well, I look forward to incremental change, because I'm really happy with my devices. So, Brian Jepson, thanks so much for talking with us today on this TOC podcast.
A pleasure to be here, Joe. Thank you.